I'm trying to comb the entire world for real martial arts talent. And honestly, I don't see any of them outside of Sistema, Aikido, and Taiji that
Yeah.
really cultivate the good stuff. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Vincent Tung, the Wandering Warrior. I'm here joined by Joseph Levitas with Kung Fu Combat. And we tear down some of these, sacred bulls. We give people the real lowdown on what these martial arts really are. First off, boxing. Why would you do boxing? Joseph, you did boxing for years. What did that
Yeah,
get you?
man, the waste of time. Waste of time, man. First of all,
Terrible.
uh rounds, right?
Hold on, let
Rounds,
me let
right?
me put on my wraps and my gloves before we start fighting.
I need the wraps for my brittle hands. This is
Yeah,
bullshit.
yeah,
They can't
yeah,
fight
yeah.
at all.
With Muay Thai, like, am I gonna really like stand around, touch my toes in your chest, touch my
No,
toes in
man,
it?
please. They do it to music. They're like, oh,
It
you
it's
actually
dumb.
go
It's
in there?
dumb. They're over there trying to feel
Right.
each other out. I don't know about you. My mentality, like, I see the opponent, I see red, boom, out.
I think like
Dumb.
for example, like Aikido guys could take them out like easy because they know how to use that and energy.
That's a really good point. Because see, like in BJJ, they're doing all this stuff like pulling guard, jumping guard, pulling people down, getting into like mount, side control, and all that. Aikido, they just gotta touch your pinky. Just gotta touch your
Right.
pinky. Think about it. Anytime you fight, you making contact with people, right? And all that, that's all
Right.
they need. They just need to make a little contact, click, quick, you, bang, flick. What's a little scary to me, like what I find a little more formidable is
Right.
honestly, it's Taiji. Because like
Ooh. Yeah.
think about it. Would you want to get in a fight where the guy is like young, muscly, outside of a bar, a little drunk, trying to fight you? Or do you want to fight an old man who's threatening
Yeah.
to float over, sink on you, swallow, and spit? Like,
Yeah,
I'm a
that
little
even
scared
the
by that,
sound
to
of
be honest.
that even sounds scary.
It's a little raunchy, to be honest, and I'm not ready for that
Right.
kind of defilement. And my body's a
No,
temple.
scary. Or like have
It's
that wrestling guys, they're so muscular. They're probably like super slow too, right? Because of all that muscle. It just weighs them down.
it's just roids. It's just roids, but roids can't protect you from chi blasts. Like the
Right.
Taiji guys,
Pressure points.
they.
Pressure points. Systema guys they can avoid all that stuff and they use this pressure point stuff and they get like did you see like Ryabko, like a fat guy, right?
Oh,
He's doing the same thing with his stomach that the Tai Chi guys, like the swallow thing. Yeah, that stomach could probably swallow.
he could
I
swallow.
think, yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah,
spit.
he got a lot of capacity. He can take in a whole lot of energy. Energy. Just he's just taking it. But the more he takes, the more he's gonna spit. So I'm trying to comb the entire world for real martial arts talent. And honestly, I don't see any of them outside of Sistema, Aikido, and Taiji that
Yeah.
really cultivate the good stuff. What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do, right? If
What are you
there's
gonna
no
do?
pajamas, no
No
pajamas.
pajamas. All right. The guy just grabs your wrist, boom, flip, done. Eating
Right?
shit, dead.
Exactly. Exactly. Dead.
Seen a system where somebody can just like slip knives like in
Yeah.
Sistema. Fighting so
Yeah, but
smooth.
what if somebody brought a knife to like UFC? Imagine that. What are you gonna do? What are you
What
gonna
are you
do?
gonna do?
You know?
What are you gonna do?
Yeah,
Chi
yeah.
blast them. That's what you
That
should do. But these other arts ain't doing it. So according to YouTube analytics, most people don't make it past the 3 minute mark. I think we've passed that.
I
Um,
almost didn't make it actually.
yeah, no, I saw that. Like, what bullshit we're talking about. Anyways, so for anybody who is still tuned in, because
This is
most people
good.
don't make it past 30 seconds, and a lot of people don't make it past 2 minutes. But if you made it past 2 or 3 minutes, you're now here and you're now in for an actual productive conversation. Thank you guys so much. So, Joseph, today we're going to be talking about the combat sports
Right.
and
Yeah.
how they play into things, strengths, weaknesses, things like that. What should we
Yeah.
start with?
I feel we shitted so much on Kung Fu in our conversations at certain periods. And traditional arts in general that I think we need to take a closer look at combat sports, and I think we should start with some Olympic sports, the unquestionable ones, untouchable arts of boxing, wrestling, judo, and so on.
Okay. So we've got boxing, freestyle, and Greco-Roman wrestling. We have
Right?
judo. and we have Taekwondo,
Taekwondo, right?
right?
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's it, right?
So so we've got that. We got those five. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, I don't know. Let's go with my favorite sport of boxing that
Boxing.
I
Yeah,
I
let's do it.
I, I
Boxing's awesome.
love. I first of all, yes. First of all, I come from a boxing background. My whole family, everybody did boxing in the family, so I love boxing. I watch boxing all the time, and I do a little boxing here and there, with my son and stuff. But I think if we look at it as like universally, like as a combat art, I think it does have a lot of limitations that are quite obvious. We we can bring in the worst possible argument here, and it'll be true, which is like, have you seen a boxing champion become a champion in UFC? And
Right.
nowhere near, there are no boxers in UFC, no people with boxing background, as a matter of fact, practically. Um,
Not
some
many.
boxing, like Peter Young, maybe, that's closest, I would say. And he's like, I think he's a candidate for Master of Sports, which is pretty good level, but it's nothing spectacular. It's just
Right. Kevin
just a
Kevin
good
Calvin Cater, I think. He lost to
who who
Cater.
we
He's from Boston. I think he lost to uh Holloway.
uh,
Um
yeah,
he's supposed to comes from a boxing foundation. Um but again,
right.
like we're not usually seeing Lomachenko or Triple G or Rigondeaux levels of boxing in
Like
MMA.
we actually see some wrestlers of high caliber, I think,
We do.
right?
We do.
And some BJJ guys that are very high level, right? Like Damian Maya, right?
Right.
But we don't see anybody from boxing from that level coming to MMA. There might be a reason for that, because perhaps boxing career is more lucrative, just money wise,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's a lot of guys that are like, okay, they're not becoming a champion, obviously, so but they're in the top 10 somewhere. They're not even trying to go over, because I think there's so much to cover.
Yeah, I
That's
think
like,
well, I think that's something to think about because
yeah,
if we even look at like the early 1900s, boxers at that time seemed to understand that there's boxing as an art of self-defense, and then there's boxing as it applies in prize fighting. And if you wanted the art of self-defense, they oftentimes combine and mixed with catch wrestlers a bit to kind of round
yeah,
things out, and other strongmen of the era to, strengthen their bodies,
yeah,
right? These three things, being a strongman, boxing, and wrestling weren't so separated at that time. It was actually quite frequent that people would overlap, on top of what
yeah,
guns and fencing, right? But by now, more than 100 years later, boxing has become this very specialized thing. And I'm not even saying that's good or bad. It's become a very specialized thing. Um,
yeah,
and people aren't even talking about boxing in the same sentence as self-defense usually. Not that it's
yeah,
necessarily bad for it, but there was a time when boxers were like, okay, this is the noble art of self-defense, and you can use it in prize fighting,
yeah.
right?
I think because of how limited usually what's going on the street is, I think boxing is still an incredibly good art for self-defense, because it gives you toughness and a limited amount of very good skills, like just hitting people hard enough is usually enough, actually, and
And also on
not
top of
getting
that,
hit.
right, without getting hit, I think
Yeah,
that's one of the greatest things. Boxing gives the average person the ability to hit harder than they normally would have,
yeah,
and understanding of timing, distance, angles to minimize themselves getting hit. I mean,
Yeah,
At the end of the day, somebody who say has the same amount of training as you and I have, but they're 6'5" and 250 pounds, is going to be able to hit harder than you or I. Just
for sure.
physically speaking, force equals mass times acceleration. They're going to be able to do
Yeah,
that. But if that
yeah,
person doesn't have a sense of timing, distance, angles, and you can manage that timing and distance and get these
yeah.
angles, that gives you a strong chance versus just getting killed,
Oh, for sure. It's a
right?
great equalizer, and it's the vehicle for that is the footwork. Boxing footwork is great. Being able to slip and dodge stuff, and actually being able to take a punch is
Mm,
also what, like, just getting cracked, but it's okay. You can handle it.
yeah,
Most of the time, if it's not super clean and super hard, which doesn't happen that often. But
right.
uh, so we went into like crazy boxing is like the best martial arts all of a sudden. But I would say, okay, so starting from that, like hitting hard. So I think a lot of modern day boxers, not all of them, but a lot of them have brittle hands. I think they trained. I think training with reps, and not really like working on conditioning. Uh, some still do, but it's not considered important anymore. Which for bare knuckle collision on the street is not a good thing. You just like you risk breaking your hands on somebody's skull, you know, easily.
Yeah, you know what? This reminds me of how, mm, for example, switching to another sport real quick, your most favorite sport.
Yeah,
In basketball,
right,
typically you need, I know you hate that shit. Typically you
right.
need what? Really good legs, good fascia,
Yeah,
good
right.
arches, right? Strong ankles. So theoretically speaking, if you come from a background where you've developed those already, the basketball sneakers or the basketball shoes help provide more cushion to the heel, the support for your arch, the protection for your ankle, the stability, so that you can go, like above and beyond your normal performance. But let's just say you don't have good fascial connection. You have very weak arches, very weak feet, very weak ankles. Now that basketball shoe is actually kind of a crutch. It's kind of helping you perform more than your body can actually handle, rather
Yeah,
than just protecting you while you're still, performing at a high level, right? So then suddenly, you something fails and bang, broken ankles. And this still happens to pros. Don't get me wrong, this still
yeah,
happens to the pros. It's just that
yeah,
normal people get this even more often, right? Same with runners. A lot of runners get injuries from going at running too aggressively without actually having built up the conditioning competency before getting to running, especially people that's, they were always unfit their whole life. Suddenly they got inspired and they're going to like, I'm going to run a marathon. They're like 30 years old. I'm going to run a marathon. They've never run more than 5 minutes in their life. And now they're going to
yeah,
try to put all that pressure on themselves. A lot of them do injure their joints or their feet.
yeah,
And it's
of
because they
course.
haven't built up their bodies to the task, right? We're seeing this in MMA with guys' shins. Their shins
Yeah,
can't take the kind of kicks that they're giving out.
right. Yeah, same. Like, yeah, exactly. Well, we'll get to that later with MMA. As far as boxing goes, I'd say it's a bit like Wing Chun in a way.
Hmm. How
The
so?
area of which I'm critical of Wing Chun is that it deals with this one particular, it claims to deal with this one particular range. They're like, we're a close combat system. What happens if you're too close or out of your range and the person knows how to deal with that range
Hmm.
better than you? I'm not comparing fighting ability of regular Wing Chun versus very regular boxer, not at all.
Hmm. Mhm.
Uh, I think everybody knows where that comparison is going to go. But as far as like boxers being not knowing usually what to do when they're like too close or a little bit out of their range is a huge problem. Like if we try to take boxing somewhere else outside of
Mm,
that ring,
mm.
not even outside of that ring, just if you go into a ring with a kickboxer, not even Muay Thai boxer, a kickboxer.
Right,
So the
right,
boxer who learned how to kick, for example, or a kicker who learned how to box, are probably going to have a lot of problems. Well, not probably. I mean, we've seen that with matches actually. There's a lot of like I don't know if I've seen those matches like in the late '80s, early '90s. There was a lot of matches between boxing versus kickboxing, and usually it did not go over. Like it wasn't good for the boxers.
right. It's become something of a hyper specialty, even though straight line from point A to point B, boxing should be some of the most foundational forms of fighting. But if it's not
Yeah,
kind of contextualized in the broader scheme of things, then you become over specialized and you don't really know how to employ that. I mean, it's like Wing Chun guys. Okay, you fight at this middle range, but you're not body clinching, but you're not in long range punching and striking. That means that not only do you have to be competent at that, you also have to be competent at all the fight skills at keeping the fight there,
yeah,
or and
yeah,
avoiding
yeah,
being caught in areas you don't want to be, using angles and
yeah.
timing and so on, right? So, I mean, this actually leads us to another Olympic sport, Taekwondo.
Mhm.
Taekwondo,
Right,
I would say if we were going to look at kicks, not looking at the fight overall or how well they train fighters, we're just looking at kicking skills. I'm hard
right.
pressed to think of another system that has such a good approach for developing your hip mobility and your legs and your balance to
100%.
really have this full expression of kicking. I'm not saying
Yeah,
they ramp people up the fastest. I'm not saying turn you into an amazing kickboxer right away. I'm saying if you want to learn full fluency of kicking, Taekwondo is up there. I think as a system. But then I guess we got to ask
I,
ourselves, like, is
yeah,
this supposed to be a kicking art, or is this supposed to be like Kyokushin with better kicking? Like, what is it actually meant to be? I think
yeah,
originally it was meant to be a form of like Korean karate that just happened to be more developed in kicking. But what we see in the Olympics is not quite the same as that, right? So something
right.
happened there.
Well, I think it went the way of point karate, which is that they became this like how many times I can tap you with my foot,
Hmm.
which is interesting because like if you can tap that fast at these angles, that means you probably kick at that angle as well. But like apparently not really, like because you know like that they sacrifice the power for speed. I
You know
think.
what? There's an interesting parallel to that. Fencing in the Olympics, right? They're not using uh, fencing weapons with realistic weight and heft and all that. If they
Yeah.
were, it would actually look a lot more like Western saber or small sword, but played to first blood, to whoever gets the cut
Right.
and not cut first, or pierced and not pierced first. And in theory, point karate and taekwondo, that sparring format, if you're a skilled fighter, you know how to employ power, blah blah blah. In theory, it means you're very good at getting that first hard strike on somebody. Like if you can get the first really clean roundhouse kick to someone's jaw, that is actually an
Right.
immensely good skill,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
But if you're but if you make that format the basis of how you test the skill of your system within your system, people just I don't know, they just gamify it. They just play to the game rather than to the intent of the martial art. I suspect, right?
Yeah. I think they have this like both point karate guys and taekwondo guys, this amazing ability to close the gap and to disengage very fast, which
Yes.
is a great skill. It's a great
Mm,
skill. It's
mhm,
amazing how
mm.
fast they can close the distance. Like you, wow, in a
Yep.
blink of an eye,
Yep.
or faster than that actually. Uh, but like I had experience training some point karate former point karate guys and taekwondo guys in boxing. Just happened to have that experience, and that stuff is great. However, like if you don't get your kick in, you kind of end up against a boxer, for example, right? And boxers move in smaller steps and they deal with smaller, uh, you know, gaps.
Mhm, mhm.
Basically, you move out of the way, not so far, like you don't jump back 2 meters. You just move enough to lean back and deliver immediate response, right? So that means once you have missed your opportunity, you are in a world of trouble, basically, because I'm close enough to land my stuff and I'm going to land it for sure because these guys don't know how to defend their head. So, like, usually zero skill avoiding punches, usually. I'm not saying all of them, but they usually, if they do have that skill, that means they usually pick up boxing, did some boxing for that because it's not in their system. So, so that I would say that's a huge, huge weakness. That footwork is great, and it's where it lands them. If they miss that shot, world of trouble, basically,
Mm,
immediately, right?
mm.
And that and them not being able to take a punch usually, because there's only one way to learn how to take a punch. It's not a
Yeah.
secret. You go to any boxing gym and you just get used to it a little bit,
Yeah.
and they're not used to it. So it's a big surprise when somebody hits you real hard. Like it was for me when I went from like boxing my age guys, my size guys, to sparring a grown up guy when I was still not fully grown up, and he hit me really hard, and I was like, oh, that's what it means. Because
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
doing boxing before that, but I was hit by the little guys like me. And it
Well,
was like,
for the record, guys, Joseph
yeah,
has a background in boxing, in one of the Soviet schools of boxing. And you were doing this at what ages?
6 through 16. And then I went to Muay Thai for 10 years,
Okay.
something
Yeah.
like that. But like a little break.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so somewhere around there, like around actually 16, they put me in a sparring with like a real big dude, grown up. Like I'd never sparred like a grown up person before. And
Mm.
yeah, and that like I felt fine until he hit me with that, like I think it was like a left hook or something like that. I was like, I didn't want any more of that immediately. Yeah. Anyway, so I
I
think
remember when
that's
I
like the
was,
surprise you're in
oh,
for
okay.
if you'd never been hit. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it just brought me back to a memory. I remember taking a really hard cross from, from somebody in training. And I mean, I think I was 16 then. I was like maybe 135 pounds, 140 pounds. You know, the other guy was like 200 pounds in shape. Boom. Like I was just like, You know, in movies where like, you get hit out of your body and you're looking back on yourself like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
how it felt. I was
yeah.
like, what's
Right.
that? Because it's also different than like, if you get in fights with other people or, the abusive family situation, most people that are not trained, they will swing wide. They will slap wide, right? And so while that has a lot of power, your ability to, in an untrained fashion, roll with it is also a little easier,
Hmm.
right? When that
Yeah,
just
because you can see it coming.
comes
Yeah.
out comes out in as straight a line as possible and you're not ready for it and you're walking into it, the
Yeah.
way the head rocks and everything, whoop, it's different.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I mean, I think boxing really is one of those like there's so many styles of boxing in terms of approaches and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
you know, I feel like boxing is one of those few Western boxing is one of those few arts that says, how can we maximize like very much like in European fencing, like how can we maximize the geometries of the straightest
Hmm.
lines possible with punching? Because our primate way of punching is very right? And there's
Yeah.
power there for sure,
Yeah.
but it can often be a little less accurate, a little less precise, harder to control, right? So that is
Yeah.
actually, I think, one of the most awesome things about boxing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the use of the body alignment, the distance management, and weight transfer, and all these trajectories, elliptical trajectories, and straight trajectories, and diagonal ones, and stuff like that. And it's
Mhm.
like it's got its stuff worked out really
Yeah,
well. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I think in some ways, although nowadays it's become more and more of a specialization, as we discussed, in some ways I really admire it because when you compare it to a lot of the Chinese martial arts, which you have a background in, I have a background in, um,
Yep.
a lot of the Chinese martial arts have compromises that are made in the
Hmm.
sense that if you wanted to learn the tippity top of punching specifically, I don't necessarily recommend Chinese martial arts as a whole. If you want to learn the tippity top of wrestling and unbalancing people and dominating someone's body and throwing them or taking them down or shooting in, I don't necessarily recommend the Chinese martial arts as a whole.
Hmm.
But if you want to be able to have a set of skills that consistently plays with both at the same time while also having certain considerations for weaponry. Now, obviously, if
Yeah.
someone stabs you from behind, you already got stabbed. It is what it is. But certain biomechanics and framing is done in such a way that you are more easily able to account for it. It gives you a greater chance. It's less specialized for a sport specific approach to things, right? And that's
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
that I think is really cool. But if I
Yeah.
wanted to
Absolutely.
improve my jab, I'm not going to necessarily practice, white snake darts tongue or whatever all day. I'm going to take boxing lessons from a good boxer to practice my jab.
Yeah.
Like
Just
Mantis boxing has a jab like techniques,
it's not the
kind
same
of,
though. Yeah.
kind of, but
Right.
they're there to kind of augment your ability to engage with your opponent in this sort of close in striking and wrestling thing, right? Sort of
Hmm.
arm's length to clinch fighting fight.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
really an inherent part of the game. I'm sure in the old days there were Chinese boxers that basically just lobbed a punch. They might have taken a hit on the forehead. They just tanked it, and then bang, they grab the guy and just try to throw him, elbow him, whatever. Right? It's
Yeah.
but if I wanted to learn very precise straight lines with my punching and a lot more maybe fine tuned or even just more time spent managing distance with punching
Yeah.
and fakes and feints and all that boxing. Western boxing.
Yeah. Yeah.
No contest,
All day. Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
All day for sure. Sure. But like I said, like if we match up a boxer and a Taekwondo guy, for example, or something like that, I think boxer's gonna have hard time closing in on the Taekwondo
Mm,
guy,
yeah.
and he might catch some legs in the process, and also, uh, stuff like that. If they, if they, at some point, Taekwondo guy is gonna have to stop running around and
Yeah.
start fighting. So that's when the actual fighting starts. I think he's gonna be in a whole lot of trouble. Like
Oh
in,
yeah. I think if we're talking about like a boxing ring situation, the boxer
yeah,
could probably
only,
corner the
only,
Taekwondo guy pretty quickly. But if we're talking
yeah.
about like an open field,
Oh, well, yeah. Then he can run around forever.
he can run around quite a long time. And
Right. Yeah.
if the boxer does something a little stupid, gets programmed, whatever, drops the hand when he shouldn't have, well, okay. I could see him
Yeah.
dropping, you know?
So I would say it's a game where like boxer would have to make a mistake slightly uncharacteristic of what he usually does.
Hmm.
However, Taekwondo guy is already sort of set up to be punished by boxer in a lot of ways.
I think it's because the if we look at it long, medium, short ranges of striking,
Yeah. Yeah.
the Taekwondoka really only has the advantage in the long range.
Yeah.
So the boxer and the Taekwondo guy both know that.
Yeah.
And as long as the boxer doesn't screw up in that area and he's able to
Yeah.
turn the fight into a mid to close range match, he should win. And so if we
Yeah.
think about spatial resources, although they all have to start at the Taekwondo's advantage,
Yeah.
uh, the other two ranges, so to speak, conceptually, are to the boxer's
Yeah.
advantage. If anytime it closes more than that, or anytime it's beyond that,
Yeah.
the boxer doesn't have to worry as much. So I think it kind of
Yeah.
boils down to that. But speaking about range, what about freestyle and Greco-Roman? Where do you think
Yeah.
they fall on just the spectrum of fighting, but also of grappling, I guess?
Uh, okay. First thing I gotta say, I gotta give to wrestlers is their athletic ability and strength, which is, I think they are much stronger than boxers or taekwondo guys. They have better stamina. They are usually much more athletic, much more flexible, uh, in an acrobatic kind of way.
Hmm.
I would say they're probably more flexible than taekwondo guys in not in the splits kind of way, but in all other, like their back, very
Hmm.
nimble,
Hmm.
stuff like that. So I would give immediate advantage to any wrestler uh, as far as athleticism goes,
Hmm.
which in the fighting world is half the thing, or maybe the whole thing sometimes.
I mean, oftentimes I find in any sparring or any fighting I've done, in the very beginning, especially when no one's really aware of each other's capabilities too much, no one has much to build a game off of yet, your ability to start imposing your game, a lot of that is obviously aided by athleticism. If you're already tired, there's a lot less you can project out there. And
Yeah,
then if the fight lasts to a certain point where everyone's dead tired, usually whoever has the better athleticism is going to win. It might look ugly, but they're gonna win that a lot of times. It's usually in that midpoint where you can kind of figure things out. You can kind of start to impose a game that experience and technical skill and all that comes in. But if you're both about to drop just out of fatigue, the one who's not going to drop is probably going to win.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Also, there's truth to the fact that uh, uh, wrestler kind of decides where it's gonna go, sort of.
Mm.
Uh, that's where the we come into like this murky territory though, of whether or not the wrestler can take the punishment on the way in. And
Y-
um, I have seen like when I was growing up, right, there was a lot of like guys that did wrestling around to fight with.
Hmm.
And there were different types, like for example, a pure wrestler that has never done any striking art could fall an easy victim to somebody who's done boxing.
Hmm.
Because if they're not used to getting just hit and it
Yeah.
just hurts,
Yeah.
and that can change the whole thing. Like I've seen that happen too, where wrestler who doesn't know how to strike never that's just not used to just getting hit. It, um, they're just getting beat up. That happens too. However, like if the guy can take a punch just naturally, for example, he's strong, he can take a punch. He's been like beat up at home or something, you know. Uh, just has a hard head, you can take a punch. That any striker is going to be in big trouble if he doesn't know any wrestling, because he's just going to take those couple of punches, close in on a guy, and maul him.
Yeah. I think one thing we also find is,
Happened to me too.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's happened to me as well, actually. Early
yeah,
on, I mean, at 16 years old, I started actually training martial arts. Before then, my dad did Taekwondo. He taught me a little bit. One of my friends did boxing. One of my friends did Kempo. They taught me little things here and there. I didn't really have a fighting system. I didn't really have training. I just
mhm.
knew I hit someone here, it hurts them. I knee them, it hurts them. I have what is it called? A rear kick when you kind of turn and kind of do like a donkey kick towards the person.
Ah, okay,
Yeah,
right.
my dad
Like
taught me that. I
spinning
got
back
pretty good
kick.
at that. Yeah, so but it's the foot down, heel up,
Yeah,
toes
yeah,
down,
yes,
right?
yeah, like
So I got pretty good at that.
mhm.
But I didn't really have a fighting system. But I do remember I was like friendly sparring with a buddy who had been doing wrestling. And I mean, I hit him, but he still did a double leg takedown on me. And there I was on the ground,
Right.
not really sure what to do.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and we replayed that a few times. And yeah, I, I could hit him, but if he can tank the hits, he can make contact. If he can make contact and I don't have wrestling, he can wrestle me down. And since then, I've found that in general, it seems because of their athleticism that they train for, wrestlers can learn to hit pretty quickly. They might not be the most precise strikers, but again, just like we
yeah.
were talking
No,
about
they.
with Chinese martial arts, if your whole purpose was to use striking to get close and hopefully hurt the guy, but at the very least
Yeah,
get close without getting punished too badly,
yeah,
leaving no challenge unanswered, then they already met their objective. They bang bang swing and then go in and body clinch. They got you with the body clinch. It didn't matter if the
yeah,
other stuff didn't knock you out. They're about to get to
yeah.
work now, right?
They
Whereas
don't
for
need. Don't need.
the boxer
Yeah,
needs a lot more work before they're ready
yeah.
to deal with wrestling to the same level of effectiveness, you know?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just to stifle the wrestling offensive. Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to train wrestling. You need to like wrestle
Yeah.
with wrestlers.
Yes.
There's nothing else you can do.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
And I
and
will
yeah,
say
yeah. Mhm.
more people actually I don't know if this is true. So I want your opinion on. I found that more people are able to take punches without a lot of training, although it's not easy. But more people are able to do that than people who are able to take falls without training.
100%. I agree with
Like
that.
I find
Yeah,
like, like if you get a big burly dude, like
yeah.
he might bitch out because of the pain of it, but he can take those punches. But if you swept his foot and he landed on the back of his head slash shoulder, bang, right onto the ground, he's not going to take that very well, right?
The thing is, there's nothing that you can hit a person like standing up equals to the number of points where you're getting hit when you get hit with the ground, because it's several different points of your body. Like
Yeah.
nobody's hitting your back, shoulder, and your head at the same time. That's not happening
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
it's like a elephant or something, you know.
True. True.
So that's like getting hit by a car or elephant,
Yeah.
or rhinoceros,
But
something like that.
even then, getting hit
Yeah.
by an elephant versus the elephant lifting you with its trunk and just bam, throwing you on the ground,
Oh, that's much worse.
the throw is
Not that I
probably
know.
still worse. The
I don't
throw is
know,
probably
but I
still,
would assume that's
yeah,
fucking
it's probably still
unpleasant.
worse.
Right.
Obviously,
Yeah.
though, this is
But
not to say,
the good thing about it, you'll never find out because you're just never gonna wake up from that.
yeah, yeah, we're
You,
not
you,
using
you
elephants
you
for war
just
no more.
lights out. You wake up and
Yeah, done. Um,
right.
I will say though, boxing I
Right.
think is more immediately useful. Like if I had to train somebody in like
Yeah.
self-defense for next week,
Yeah.
oh shit, we might you might need to just keep distance, hurt them a little, maintain your distance and angles. But if
I
I was to train somebody over like 2 years to be a fighter, I might rather start them out in wrestling.
I think I would slightly disagree there. I think if I was to teach somebody to fight next week, I would show them a couple of punches and a double leg takedown or something.
You know what? It's funny you say that because I think that's where the overall meta of fighting has become because everyone watches MMA now, so they're like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
jab, cross, double leg." Everyone can do that.
Well, I think it's a good
Not well,
formula
but they can
for
do it.
like 1 or 2 weeks. I think that's nice formula.
So, question. This leads me
Right.
back to say freestyle wrestling. Would you teach it from a boxing systemic perspective and then add the shoot for the double leg as something you add in? Or would you approach it from a wrestler's standpoint and then just say, hey, before we tap this, fake here, instead we replace those with punches?
No, I want him to be able to hit hard. I don't care if it's boxing style or if it's Hungar style,
Um,
but he needs to hit like you can't play around. Like if you're fighting, you need to hit somebody hard. It's not like I wouldn't teach him jab. Okay, if
okay.
I have like 1 week, I would teach him a couple of hard punches.
Mm,
Like a good right hand, good left hook, and maybe an uppercut, and then drill that double leg a lot. You know.
yeah, yeah, I can see that. Um, so that brings me to my next thought, I guess. Freestyle wrestling. Uh, I don't know as much about Western wrestling as I know about, say, Mongolian wrestling, or Shijiao, right? But freestyle wrestling seems to have been like a sparring format for British catch wrestling at one point. It
Right?
was like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
safer version. You're not doing this, you're not bending joints out, whatever, right? You're not doing
Right.
pain compliance things, spine compression, but you're
Yeah.
still getting someone to the ground. You're rewarded more points based on bigger, better takedowns and throws. And you have to pin somebody to control them. And as we know in, say, jujitsu, pinning allows for the more assured submissions, right?
Right. But you do have like bits and pieces of pain holds and submissions left in there.
Yes,
They
a
just
little
use
bit.
them to reverse and to get out of stuff. But it's
Yes.
like there, like it's not like a freestyle wrestler doesn't know this.
It's
It
not far removed, right?
If
So
he wants to snap somebody's leg off, he could probably just easily do that.
yeah, yeah, like an alligator doing a
He can
death roll.
probably do that better than a BJJ guy, actually.
With more
Probably.
athleticism at least. They're definitely
Yeah,
very
yeah,
in
I'm
tune with their
saying you could
bodies.
just like twist it over and carry it away with you.
Now,
I'm taking this leg,
but you
but
know what I noticed about freestyle?
right. Mhm.
Mm, this is not even a criticism. This is just an observation. Where
Mhm.
judo, Shuaijiao, Mongolian wrestling, and some of the other wrestling styles focus a lot more on physical top level control, which obviously is even easier with a jacket. Not that it's easy, it's just that you have more actual grips to hold, right?
Yeah.
Freestyle, because of you're just wearing a singlet, you basically have no jacket gripping going on, which are fleeting. Right? I mean, I can get a hold on you, but you can get out of that, So it becomes in a sense less about gripping per se, gripping and control, and a greater emphasis on the sort of quick tilting of enemies and creating temporary openings that you oftentimes shoot for or combo in for. Because I noticed that the game is quite different. You have less friction. You have less time spent in each hole. But what you don't have there, you have plenty of more opportunities for movement and maneuverability in a whole body sense, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you could
definitely.
argue, you could argue, because of the rule set, a far more developed shooting and leg attack, body to leg attack uh, game than
Mhm.
the aforementioned Asian arts, who tend to have a more developed throwing and sweeping game because greater top control,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Uh, um, I would say wrestling is more limited, and as far as like the amount of techniques they have, like the classical wrestling and freestyle. There's just less techniques to work on as uh, compared to jacket wrestling styles.
Hmm.
Well, because there's no jacket, so we do that's like cuts to
Yeah,
in
you got
half
fewer
at
grips.
least.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. But also it's just it's more minimalistic overall, I think, in that
Mhm,
sense.
mhm.
But there's definitely more of a body usage, like as a weapon,
Yeah,
as
yeah. I've
as a
personally
lever.
right. I
Yeah.
personally found that in if you're skilled in jacket wrestling styles and you're
Mhm.
encountering a jacket, there's a lot you can do there in terms of control and leverage and position that can negate someone else's athleticism. Which also means that with enough skill and really good strong grips with against someone's jacket, you can get away with being less athletic, right? You don't necessarily want
Right.
to be, but you could get
So
away with
I have a question then. Like, as you know, I just started wrestling, so like I don't know about wrestling like that. I don't know that much about wrestling. So, would you say that jacket wrestlers are a little less athletic, uh, but they have more technique to rely on
it.
as opposed to
So
classical wrestling?
I think your average person doing judo classes, say in America, can get
Mm-hmm.
away with being less athletic than your average person doing high school or collegiate wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Your average BJJ person doing gi could probably get away with being a little less athletic than the average person doing no gi, maybe. But at the Olympic level, which is what we were kind of talking about before, I don't think
Right.
there is a massive difference in
Hmm.
their athleticism. Because,
Right.
like we mentioned in the beginning, if all else equals, then the athleticism will put you above, right? If you're more athletic. If all
Let me
else equal, skill. If all else equal, experience, willpower, right? Every advantage.
let let me ask you a different, same question, but in a different way. Uh, what if we take a Greco-Roman wrestler or freestyle wrestler, give him a jacket, and have him compete against a similar level judoka? What do you think?
That's interesting.
Individual cases aside,
Yeah, yeah. I would
just
say,
abstract.
I mean, if you were talking about 100 years ago, the outcome might be different than today. Today, people are much more aware of everyone else's game and strengths and weaknesses than they used to be. Um, I think it's partly to do with how we're going to judge success. So if success is getting an ippon, like as is judged in judo, one clean throw, bang, they land on their shoulders. If the success is based on ippon, I think judo guy gets the advantage. If success is based on skill in pinning, ippon or not, or sorry, if the skill is based on pinning and you're not going to reward throwing, sweeping, takedowns as much, pinning is what wins. I think I would still give a certain amount of advantage to the freestyle wrestler.
Yeah, that makes
If you
perfect sense.
said if you said no time limit, whoever is still able to stand at the end of it, stand back up, and the other person cannot stand back up. Uh, I think the Greco-Roman guy has some serious attributes.
Yeah.
You know, they might not necessarily have quite the same tilting and shooting game that the freestylists have. They might not have the same type of tachiwaza, guzushi, nagewaza, whatever that the judokas have. But the sheer physicality of their form of wrestling, and again, I think it is a specialty, but it's an incredibly powerful specialty. Um, yeah, if we were going to make it just wrestle until one man can't wrestle, uh, Greco-Roman has some advantages. Now, obviously, fighting is not like that, right? Fighting as a
Right.
whole, someone picks on you on the street, pinning them, great. Throwing them on their head, great. Knocking them out with a punch, great. Knocking them out with a kick to the head, also great. They all work,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Liver
Yeah.
kick, bam, snap kick to the jaw, awesome. No problem with it.
Right.
But if we're talking about the sheer physicality of just wrestling till another man can't, body clinching him and dominating him, I mean, Greco-Roman is up there. Greco-Roman's up there. Mongolian wrestling is up there. Sumo wrestling is up there. These are very tough arts to endure.
So, so specialization and athleticism win again.
If you can make if you can make the game to
Right.
your advantage, and you're untouchable in that particular field of advantage, right?
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest, I don't see a boxer beating a Greco-Roman wrestler in a enclosed area, and you just told them fight until someone can't.
Yeah.
That's a
I
tough one
think I
for
would.
the boxer. I mean, don't
I
get me
think
wrong,
I
he can
would. I
knock him
would.
out.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Unless he knocks him out.
But
Yeah.
then when he
So.
gets grabbed
mm,
around the
Yeah.
waist, I don't know about that anymore. It's done. You know,
Yeah.
statistically,
I think I give it to Greco-Roman guy.
right? Uh,
Uh, Actually, the funny
mhm.
thing is, I think Greco-Roman guy might have more trouble with the Taekwondo guy than a boxer in open space.
In an open space. Because you could also argue their games happen on opposite ends of the range spectrum.
Right. The thing is, I think a lot like what Greco-Roman guys might be a weak point for them is Not freestyle. Freestyle, I don't think they have that problem. But I think for Greco-Romans, they never have to close the distance. They just walk towards each other. They go head to head almost, or literally head to head, and they just go at it. So
Yep.
I think that whole game is just completely absent there.
Mhm.
And that's something very hard to overcome when somebody like a boxer is much closer. So you can sort of he wants to be closer because he wants to punch you, right? So he's kind of there to grab. But the Taekwondo guy is not gonna get to him at all. Like he's
Yeah.
just gonna stay outside, and I don't think he's gonna have the same problem as keeping outside of the boxer's range.
Right. I think, yeah, I can see what you mean there. And I think that when we compare freestyle and Greco-Roman, right, we're comparing essentially comparing like a sportified version of like British wrestling that's spread around the world and a sportified version of French wrestling that's spread around the world. Freestyle actually, I think, syncs up a lot better with the dynamics of a fight with striking
Mhm.
because of their footwork and level changing and stuff.
Yeah,
Greco-Roman is very much in the world of wrestling. Now,
yeah,
within the world of wrestling, it's an incredibly impressive, or the format encourages incredibly impressive specimens, athletes, fighters, right, to appear.
yeah.
Uh, but I do think it's a little more specialized. That said, if I had to be body clinched by a taekwondoka,
Right.
a freestyle guy, a boxer,
How would
a
I'm
judoka,
just wondering
or a
how would that
Greco-Roman
happen?
guy,
How would
yeah,
how would that happen? Body clenched by Taekwondo guy. Like
yeah, there's
why would
something,
why
something,
would he
some
do that? That
exactly something went wrong. But then again, none of the other
right.
guys are gonna throw like a three kick combo at my face, you know. So, that this goes to show the differences and the specialties. Um, I think I think we can kind of transition to talking about other fight sports and of course the associated martial arts that
Yeah.
are incredibly popular worldwide, but
Hmm.
aren't Olympic, right? Because the Olympic
Right.
sports, they have sort of their mass appeal, and they have very much at this point national or regional approaches, no matter what their origin was, right? We're just starting to see that more and more with, say, Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right?
Hmm.
Muay Thai has definitely earned its stripes. Muay Thai has definitely earned its place in the world. And I think the Thais have invested more in their version of the Southeast Asian boxing than, say, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, because their economies aren't as good. So the
Right.
Thais have really done a good job in that regard. Historical reasons, understandably, but still. So Muay Thai has obviously earned its place. It has long range attacks, albeit pretty simplified compared to its ancient predecessor, right? Muay Boran, which is a little more like, traditional Chinese boxing in terms of its approach to things. Um, Punching, kicking, clinching. It doesn't have all wrestling, but has a sort of a version of wrestling in its clinch
Hmm.
work, elbows, knees. It has sweeps. What do you think are the drawbacks of such a thing? Even though it is proven, it's good, but what do you think are the drawbacks of this guy?
Uh, it's very hard to find them because it was battle tested. Thai guys always fought against everybody. There were like teams of karate guys and taekwondo and kickboxers and boxers coming and even some like wrestlers and stuff like that. And they just never back away from fighting anybody. So, but I would say its weak point, surprisingly, was traditionally. It's getting better now. The hands,
Mm,
uh, because that's where, like, you can see that in the early matches, especially now, not so much, maybe, but like early matches against European kickboxers and that came from boxing background, was the fact that they didn't know how to defend the real boxing
mm,
hands.
mm,
It did not have good. They could take a punch. They can take a hell of a punch, but like, how many can you take, right? So
mm,
you know. That and the actual boxing technique, like actual punches, weren't that great. Like they were very rudimentary. Um, it's changing. Like a lot of like guys in top teams in Thailand, they just have coaches that boxers, and there is now boxing in Thailand, so they have their own boxing, and they have some good boxers. There's now not so many as like Muay Thai, but there's some champions there and stuff like that. So it's getting better, but that's like what comes to mind is absence of head movement, which they had
mm.
none, and just no, like their hands were like very basic. I wouldn't say they're bad; they're just very basic. You know.
It feels to me very much that young Muay Thai, which is basically nationally sportified Thai boxing, because there's many village styles, many different things, right? They practice forms, weapons, unify into a sport. They gave it gloves. Um, it seems like at that time, it was still kind of the old combatives model of I'm gonna kick and punch my way into being able to clinch the person, and from there I'm gonna just fucking end them and then topple them to the ground, which in theory is pretty similar to most karate and kung fu and silat styles
100%.
in general, right? So the punching only has to be as good as it gets you to the place where you can dominate the person, which is usually some form of clinch-like thing, right?
Right? Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so that seems to have been the case. Now it looks like they are not only great clinch fighters, they're also getting very fluent in striking specifically.
Yeah, and the kicking changed too, because
Mm,
like
mm,
some Dutch, like former Kyokushin guys that turned into Muay Thai introduced them to
mm.
some kicks they haven't seen before,
Yep.
and they immediately adopted that. Now they all know how to do the X kick, the
X
question
kick,
mark kick,
question mark. Yeah. Yeah.
all kinds of kicks that they had never done that before. They
You
were
know,
not there.
that's the irony. I actually learned question mark kick from when I did Muay Thai
Yeah,
in my 20s, early 20s. And then I
yeah,
find out, oh, they didn't. I'm not saying none of them ever had it, but it
yeah.
wasn't a normal thing in Muay Thai originally. I was like, oh, it was actually
No,
those Dutch guys
no,
that
they actually did not have it. They did
you
not have
know,
it at all. Like what my first Muay Thai coach was all traditional dude who was like, all we had was a push kick, tip, uh, variations of like low, middle, and high kicks, and that's about it, sort of.
mm,
Well, stopping kicks,
oh,
too, like those
yeah,
push kicks,
yep.
stopping kicks. You we had that, but we like they weren't there. But like most of I think Thais are in general just very flexible people, not in gymnastics kind of way. I mean, like mentally. So they're like, oh, that's good, this works. Now it's in. We're gonna use that. That's it. They don't care if there wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mostly, mostly. I ran into a guy that did care, but like in general, I think they don't care. It's like whatever works.
Yeah, it's about fighting. you
Yeah,
know. Uh,
just take that and run with it.
yeah, yep. You know what? To sidetrack it slightly,
Mhm.
speaking of boxing and the advantages of boxing, speaking of the advantages of the sort of Taekwondo-esque kickboxing model, um,
Mhm.
a sport that never took off the same way Muay Thai did, but has a similar combination of skills, Sanda.
Yeah, yeah,
Sanda, literally, in my opinion, mainstream Sanda basically had taken uh, Western boxing from Russia or USSR,
fact.
uh,
They just did
kicking that may have been Chinese, but was heavily, I think, heavily influenced by karate and taekwondo formula for training.
for sure.
Not the kicks themselves, but like the approach to the training for it.
Yeah,
And then the throws were already there, right?
yeah,
There may have been some Western influence as far as training methodology, but I mean the throws they've been there.
yeah.
And they kind of created concocted out of late Qing Chinese pugilism, um, a really interesting fight sport.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing sport. It should be more
You know,
popular. I think
should
it
be.
might actually because uh, I think just politically, I think China is such a powerhouse that I think that all the guys that coming from Sanda and they will filter into MMA, and I think it's inevitable at some point Sanda is gonna be like Muay Thai maybe, like very popular. It's just
It's
the connection to throwing. It's
yeah,
great. It's so
yeah,
fluent.
yeah, yeah. I think to be honest, even though I mean I come from
Yeah.
traditional Chinese boxing, both of us have background in mantis boxing styles. Sanda athletes, fighters, they execute on that punching, kicking to throw combination better than most traditionalists I've seen. The way they train that, the way they execute on it is is
Well,
quite fantastic. And
yeah,
what I love about it is it's validating to see people doing what I train, but on the pro level. Now,
yeah,
sadly, China doesn't seem to promote this stuff more than it promotes, performance wushu or taiji. But I think the fact that more and more Chinese MMA guys and girls are getting into the UFC, the fact they're doing really well, the fact they're able to string together their punching, kicking, and their throws fairly fluidly is a testament to what's good about Sanda and by extension about a lot of the Chinese martial arts. The Chinese martial arts approach to the empty hand fighting. We can have a different discussion about where Sanda does things well compared to the traditional way of doing things. We can talk about where the traditional way has fallen off or been
right.
misconstrued, contorted, whatever. But the skill set itself, the striking into contacting into throwing people, they do it really well. Love
100%.
it.
Uh, First of all, I mean, some criticism on Sanda from the traditional guys, and I understand that, and it has some validity. But I'm just happy to see this art that's one third kung fu, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Half kung fu, a third kung fu, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
at least one third. I'm being minimalistic here, just regarding the kicking.
yeah,
Uh, but it's like at least one third. You could
yeah.
say that it's 50-50, or it's two-thirds kung fu if you just
Maybe.
because the kicks are the kicks, so the way they trained, maybe yeah, it's karate-esque or taekwondo related, but it's not like, well, most of those kicks are in Chinese arts as well. So
Yeah, yep.
uh, you could, like, in my opinion, we're sidetracking here completely, but you could make Sanda more kung fu like by adding kung fu hand striking, you know, and
It would.
and and
Yeah,
and add more kung fu kicks,
I
and
think,
then you
yeah,
have like baji or chodziao or tungbei almost art that's like full contact.
honestly, if you took away gloves, uh, you opened up to basically any kicking, and you made them wear clothing like gis, and you had no time limit to clinch work. They could just
Yeah,
wrestle, trap, or not do it at all. They decide, right? Just depends on the
yeah,
fighters. You'd probably basically end up with Chinese boxing. And it would probably look less clean in many ways because you'd be tied up doing stuff, but it would look cleaner in other ways.
yeah, yeah. It's our perception of what clean is. Like
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
dictated by what we're used to seeing from kickboxing, boxing, and modern MMA.
Yep.
For but that actually doesn't mean that it's like that's the only way to
To
have an
fight.
enjoy
To
to
fight.
fight. Yeah, to
Fight
fight
human
exactly.
fighting, you know?
Right. Yeah. I gotta say, well, first of all, I mean, Sanda has already made its mark in MMA. We got like Zabit Magomed Sharipov, who comes from he's a Sanda
Yep.
fighter. He
John Whaley.
represent he represented Sanda very well there because he was doing all the Sanda stuff, like in the cage and stuff that I didn't think you you could do. Some of those kicks were incredible. And Salihov, another like he was a several-time world Sanda champion. Uh, Ankalaev right now, who's about to fight either Pereira or like somebody and then Pereira. He's going to fight for the title now. He's a Sanda
Mm.
fighter.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah,
Sanda from the same school, I think.
yeah,
Uh, and then there's a bunch of Chinese guys and
yeah,
girls. Uh,
yeah.
Last night somebody won, but I did
Oh, I haven't
not
seen it
watch.
yet. I
I
haven't seen
haven't
it
seen,
yet.
I haven't seen it yet either. Yeah, but yeah. So yeah, Zhang Li and a bunch of other people. So yeah, so it's right there. I think it's gonna get more and more exposure. I'm not really worried about Sanda actually that much. I think it's getting good exposure. Anyway, so getting back to those, so Muay Thai, I would say like the hands maybe. That's maybe that, and if we're talking just fighting, the wrestling obviously is just like for boxing, like it's not there. Like some stand-up wrestling, but like not
Mm.
really. You know?
Right, right.
Obviously.
Now, do you think it's still enough of a base to work from?
Uh
Or do you think it's
what
significantly deficient
depending
to
on
be
the
a part?
format, what kind of format are we talking?
Any. If you are
Uh,
just gonna get a fight in a fight on the street, you don't know what they know, they may know nothing. Do you think
well,
Muay Thai clinch work is enough wrestling?
mm,
General.
no, no, because now as I learn about wrestling for the last like 5 6 years now, uh, I can see how I could do a lot more in the clinch now that I know it,
Yeah.
and um, in boxing and in Thai boxing, both in both ways,
Mhm.
I could probably do like way better right
You know,
now than I.
I've encountered that similar feeling. Obviously, officially started wrestling in 2020, kind of dabbled a little bit for the year or two before that.
Mhm.
Um, I'm Shuaijiao background, doing Mongolian wrestling now. One of the things that kind of confuses boxers that I play with is, I work at an MMA gym right now, Redline Fight Sports. Sometimes I play around with those guys. one thing that kind of confuses these boxers is as long as my forearms or hands can touch your arms, a lot of times I can prevent myself from getting hit.
Yeah.
Now there are boxers coming from specific schools that do that too because they wrestle.
Right.
But boxers who don't wrestle are kind of like, what the hell is this? This is awkward. This is disturbing. This, because wrestling teaches you how to dominate someone's body, literally their body,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally dominate their body, hands on dominate their body. And so the way I can move people's arms, boom, 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 and I'm pretty good. I'm even if any
Yeah.
hits land, they're not hitting flush. I'm pretty good. Again, this is
Yeah.
this is where my skill level in wrestling is beyond their skill level in using boxing to counter wrestling. So
Yeah.
there's a disadvantage here, but
Yeah.
they're like, what the hell is this? But
Yeah.
at the same time, what I find, and this is the same for Thai clinch work, Westerners often have a hard time appreciating Thai clinch work the same way they have a hard time really appreciating that dirty, sticky boxing wrestling
Yeah.
range. They
Yeah.
might be like, oh, I noticed he didn't get hurt, and then he managed to slip a lot of stuff, hit him a few times for free. But they don't necessarily, they're not like, that's the sweet stuff. Whereas Thais will look at Thai clinch work and be like, oh man, that's that good stuff, right? Most Westerners, which is obviously Westerners kind of dominate the MMA market,
Right.
they don't really appreciate that stuff that much.
Yeah.
Like we can look at how bad Khabib was at striking compared to good strikers, but we can
Right.
also marvel at how good Khabib was at not getting hit badly
Right.
by really good strikers.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
most,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like we could look at either side of that equation, but most people in the West are like, wow, he's a terrible striker. But
Yeah.
from a wrestling standpoint, you're like, he may not be that great at the art of punches,
Right.
but he's very good at not getting knocked out and then getting you on the ground and doing the same fucking game to everybody. Everyone can study him,
Right.
but he's just light years ahead of them,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So then you got to think, oh, there's something good there. But there's a lot of guys who couldn't appreciate that the same
Yeah.
level, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that brings me
I
to
think.
like BJJ. Like a lot of people can't appreciate BJJ unless they've done it because they're like, ew, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Like even BJJ community has like embraced the whole BJJ is gay, kind of jokes because
Right.
it looks funny.
I gotta say it's like it's a same thing with music. Like certain kinds of music, I think you need to understand a little more of a background of what's going on there to appreciate it. Like certain like with some of the classical and jazz music, for example. You not like if you have no background in that whatsoever, and you just sit down and listen to it, it's just not gonna do it. Like
Mm.
you need to look to understand what the hell is going on there.
Mm.
So it's kind of like that when you put a lot of ingredients together. Like if you're a fan of wrestling, you're just watching wrestling. You know, that's one thing. And then if you're the same person and you're watching an MMA fight, you might not understand 60% of what's going on there. You know, like so something like that.
You know, at least in America, I found that Americans seem to be more and more into fighting, but also less and less like fluent in fighting or appreciative of fighting. Like if you look
Mhm.
at wrestling or boxing, almost every American knows, there's roundhouse kick, there's these punches in boxing, there's double leg, single leg, suplex, they know all that stuff, right? But at the same time, fewer and fewer Americans seem to be able to appreciate boxing to the same level or wrestling to the same level. Like, I think there's a reason why WWE came about, for example,
Yeah.
right? And that also kind of coincides with uh, American rough and tumble kind of fading out. And what was that? That was basically just people wrestling dirty and fighting each other, you know? But that was fading out. And we even see, we see nowadays very few Americans actually box. Whereas Americans, as a whole, boxing was popular once.
Yeah.
Boxing is not a popular sport for the average American anymore.
Yeah.
Boxing is
Yeah.
fun to watch, but if you don't
Right.
do it, your ability to appreciate it truly, kind of goes down. So it's like they know more about fighting now in terms of like techniques. Oh, that's a go-go plug. Oh, that's a
Right.
that's a question mark kick. That's a whatever. But the average American's personal ability to wrestle or strike doesn't seem as good as it used to be based on the trends of the market.
I think it's a normal thing for society that just getting richer and richer.
More
Just life.
peaceful, wealthier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they like they but two things happen simultaneously for the same reason. One, there's no reason to really learn how to fight. Like,
True.
well, maybe there is, but like you don't realize it. Like, like real like it's more right now. Like if you're learning how to fight, it's more for like a betterment of yourself. So like
Mm-hmm.
you challenge yourself, you see like, can you take this much punishment, this, that, right? Um, but it's not really like you don't really expect to go out and get like attacked, really, maybe. Like most people, at least, like in most areas. Like there are bad places everywhere in every country, but if you're living in a big developed country, if you just avoid those areas, I say you 90% of the time you'll be just fine. And if not, you have your paper pepper spray, and you call the police or something like that. They arrive real fast usually, right? So,
Mm.
and that same thing does to, at least to men, one thing is it emasculates them
Right.
because evolutionary, we've done this fighting to survive for hundreds of thousands of years. And
Yeah.
before that, our ancestors did that. And before that, their ancestors did that. And tiny little change at this like tiny little period of time that we're living in cannot really change that. Like it's there. Like we want to be masculine. We want to dominate. We want to fight. And stuff like that. But we have no real reason to do that. So watching the fights and learning about them in theory is kind of like a supplement for that.
I have a theory, and I think you just actually helped me a little with it. I have this personal theory that mm, the more barbaric your everyday life is,
Mm-hmm.
the more you kind of want a cleaner thing to entertain yourself with, the more you want sophisticated things. You want something that's not your life because you're surrounded by barbarity. So can we
Yeah,
do things a little more gentlemanly? Can we
yeah,
not have our fighters die up on the platform? In Britain, they started putting on gloves. In China, there started being this convention of, hey, let's start our duel crossed hands.
right.
And then whoever gets knocked off, boom, they lost. You don't have to just like smash somebody and kill them. There's a civilized way to do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Let's just do wrestling without wrenching people's arms off,
yeah.
you
It's
know?
really fighting.
Yeah. And a lot of the sports or the fighting formats we saw had to ride this line of life is brutal, war is brutal. You need people to be ready for that, but you also want something a little more civilized. Like
Mhm.
Mongolian wrestling does not have to result in the death and dismemberment of people participating in it.
Right, right.
Mongolian soldiers had to be ready to dish out the death and dismemberment to people. They had a sport that was able to, that is still able to train your body and mind to be a warrior, to wrestle someone to the ground, no matter what, rain or shine, any terrain. And yet you get back up and you go back to herding your animals the next day, right? So it fits that need of being civilized enough and yet raw enough. I would argue bare knuckle boxing is pretty raw, but all things considered, in terms of concussions, in terms of a lot of stuff, with the right rules, you can keep it pretty civilized. We look at today MMA, right? Most of the world is safer than it's ever been, aside from specific regions and specific cities and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But if we look at MMA, it's probably a step backwards in terms of the like cleanliness of it. And we're going back to like wild Muay Thai fights of China. We're going back to, you know, uh messy 1800s prize fighting in England, where they're just like bare knuckles, shin kicks, a little bit of wrestling, a lot of boxing, right? We're going back to a little bit of rough and tumble, yeah, without eye gouging and fish hooking the cheek and all that, but wrenching people's shoulders and necks and all that. Society got more civilized, so now we're like, oh, but we're still men. We can still do raw shit. And so now
Yeah.
we got MMA, which I think is great because it gives these arts maybe not a one-to-one testing ground from where they were born, but at least it's
That's
close,
close enough. Yeah. Close enough.
you know?
Yeah. Close enough without killing anybody. So that's good.
Yeah. But then if you're trying to not come off barbaric and all that, then judo looks clean. Modern boxing looks clean, right?
Yeah. And I
You
gotta
know,
say, in the overall, like, I think a judo guy,
we gotta go
a
soon, but
yeah, a judo guy, wrestling guy, MMA guy, Thai boxing guy, Taekwondo guy, actually on the street have they have really about the same chances, I think, because it's a
mm,
street, because there's too many variables, and it's just like trained guy, non-trained guy.
mm.
I'm not
I
putting them
think,
to not putting a boxer versus Taekwondo guy on the
yeah,
street.
yeah, yeah.
Those guys against just some asshole on the street or a bunch. Um, I think they have equal chances, and the chances are better than average.
Oh yeah, better than average. And I think it also another thing maybe we want to close on this point is I hate this idea of fight sport versus traditional martial art. I hate that. I hate that whole concept of this or that.
Yeah.
I prefer to think of it more like this. In the old days, a lot of the kung fu guys, uh, they actually did a decent amount of some form of wrestling. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of evidence for it as far as that's been handed down, but we know that there was a lot of them doing some form of wrestling and they had to be prepared for a striking and wrestling type fighting.
Yeah.
Most Okinawans did wrestling and then they practiced their karate, right?
Right.
Samurai were practicing jujitsu and they would add what? Knives and the occasional throat jab or whatever to their jujitsu, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and what was their main sport? Well, it was sumo.
Yeah.
So there was a sport thing you could do to really hone your skills of distance, timing, impact.
So,
But then there were combative techniques
yeah.
that you could add to that. That okay, if I got to put some guy down right now, am I just going to jab him in the nose, or am I going to poke an eye out? If I can get the reaction time to do either, I'll poke his eye out.
Yeah.
But jabbing in the nose is the safer way to train that skill,
For
right?
sure.
And I think we've seen in like Sambo versus Russian army combatives. I mean, combatives training has a lot of great techniques for putting a guy down. doing Sambo day in and day out allows you to have those same fight skills to a higher degree. So I don't
Yeah.
like this or that. Like on my own personal journey, I do Chinese boxing. I do Chinese boxing, and it's maybe more optimized for the street than it is for a duel at the moment. But I also do Shijiao. I do
Yeah.
Mongolian wrestling. That is my sport. That is my dueling. I can grab and throw somebody. I can hit and grab and throw somebody. To me, there's not a huge difference at the end of the day. And I think I'm more, I'm benefited by having done both.
Yeah. Well, first of uh, all of those traditional schools, if you look at the biographies of any of those masters that we actually know the biographies of,
Right.
uh, uh, they would grow up training their family thing, whatever that was. And then they would go somewhere else and learn some other stuff. Then they would go somewhere else and learn some other stuff. And I'm
Right.
sure there was a Taekwondo master living next door. They would learn from him as well. And they would pick up some Greco-Roman from a Greco-Roman guy, and they
Yeah.
would do a BJ, whatever they thought was like working for them. They would pick that up and learn it.
Yeah.
I don't see any problem with that whatsoever. And it's a weird situation where they're like trying to say that any one style is like so perfect and so like it's incredible. Like there's everything in it. It's everything in it. Well, no, like we
No.
have like legitimate things like boxing, and there's nothing even like it. You can't say that there's everything in it. There's nothing in it. it's it's six punches and several ways to like 12 ways to move your feet at the most, and several ways to avoid punches and block them. So it's like if we gather all of that stuff together, we're gonna get like 30 techniques and something like a bunch of combos, which
Yeah.
is what like traditional styles usually consisted of, like Lanzia, right? The original praying mantis form, 37 techniques. That's it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get the basic
I mean,
stuff, 37 techniques and ways to like apply them, like multiple
right.
ways to.
Right. I
That's
think
it.
I think technically sumo has 60 or 80.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at grappling, there's a lot of ways to grapple the body, but
right.
even then, we're not talking about anything with a jacket. We're just talking about bare body and belt, right?
Yeah,
With
yeah,
push-outs. You can amplify that if you do the jacket wrestling styles, but even then you'll say, oh, but you're missing striking,
yeah,
right? We add all the submission game, right? Then it's a whole nother thing. You can look at
yeah,
judo. Judo does a good breakdown of that. Samba does a good breakdown of that. But ultimately, I think the lesson is there's pros and cons to everything.
yeah,
Get fit, learn a variety of skills that suit your body type and what you got to deal with, and
yeah,
put in the practice.
yeah. Yeah, it's also I think it's important to this you if you just which is 99% of the people just practicing as amateurs for themselves, not for competition or anything like that. I think it's very important to not try to compare yourself to world champions or something like that. Uh, that's a ridiculous plank that just gives you like a wrong perspective on what you need to
Yeah,
do. You need
yeah,
to understand
absolutely.
what you need to do to get better at whatever it is you want to do.
Yes. I mean,
Goals,
we
you
won't
know?
even break down like who that person is and their genetics and family background. We won't get into what discipline to practice. Just the fact that one person's life for those 5, 10, 15 years is this, and your life is school, business, job, family,
Yeah,
kids, this, that, whatever. Oh, and you get to carve out maybe 1 to 5 hours of your week to do this thing for self-protection and for because it's your passion.
right? Exactly. Yeah,
So if you can make that 1 to 5 hours the most fulfilling and efficient use of your time for the martial arts,
yeah,
great. You shouldn't expect to be world-class judoka if you're doing it 3 hours a week.
No, that's crazy. Yeah.
That's crazy. But if you can be the guy who knows enough judo and some striking defense that when some asshole takes a swing at you outside the bar, you can avoid it or block it, grab him, boom, throw him down, pin him down, or get the fuck away. That's great. You are a
Yeah.
hero. You came
No,
home to
man.
your family without being hurt. You are a hero.
Sometimes it's even simpler things. Like I had this I had this student, right? So he told me like after we did this for like a couple of years, and I was like, this guy's never gonna be a fighter. Obviously, he's like lacks all the cool. He's a very nice guy, but he's just not a fighter. But whatever. But he was practicing, he was doing stuff. He wasn't like super serious about it either. But then one time he showed up and he was like, yesterday, I slipped and I fell and I did not break anything. I was like, wow. He was like, I think that's because I fell the right way. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that because like you obviously got something out of it.
Yeah. And honestly, how do most people die towards the end of their lives?
Oh yeah, broken
Falling.
hips and stuff, right?
Falling. I
Yeah,
mean, I got hit by a car last November, and thankfully I fell the right way
right.
because otherwise I'd be all jacked up. You know, it's
Yeah,
it's pretty scary stuff. In any
yeah,
case,
yeah.
I think that's it. I got to get going, but hopefully the people that decide to make it past the first few minutes of us
Right,
just being stupid,
right,
hopefully you guys got something out of this conversation. Me and Joseph talk about this stuff all the time, and we've decided we want to share a lot more of these musings and insights with the rest of y'all. So, if you guys have had any opinions whatsoever on what we discussed, any commentary, anything you want to add, sound out down below. And if you want to support the things that we're doing, definitely like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Anyways, till next time.
hey, if you want us to craft your favorite martial arts, let us know.
Yeah. Let us know what you'd like to see. In any
Yeah,
case, thank
we'll
you.
break it down for you.